Hi, I'm Nico Masteritis, and this is my interpersonal communication self-improvement presentation. And to kick things off, I want to use a quote from the former CEO of the Sara Lee Corporation, John Bryan. He once said, quote, "You have to be willing to sometimes listen to some remarkable bad opinions. Because if you say to someone, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard, get on out of here, then you'll never get anything out of that person again, and you might as well have a puppet on a string or a robot." And within this quote, John Bryan is really alluding to the overall idea of active listening. And that's the exact concept of my presentation today, active listening. Within his book titled Active Listening, Joseph Sorensen explains the importance of active listening in our everyday lives, as well as how to just apply it within our lives as a whole. Whether dealing with conflicts, love relationships, power struggles, or culture, active listening remains key in building and maintaining efficient communication, as well as building and maintaining beneficial relationships. So, moving into the topics of this presentation, first, I'm going to go in order just of what Sorensen discussed in his book. He first talked about just basic listening skills and how to improve those. Next, I'm going to talk about 6 tips that he offers for active listening as a whole and how to increase active listening. Third, I'm going to talk about how Sorensen integrates the first 2 topics together. And fourth, I'm going to talk about how this book affected me personally. But moving into the first point, which is just building up on those basic listening skills. Sorensen said, quote, "Active listening involves ensuring that the message received by the listener is accurate. Good listeners never equate hearing to active listening," end quote. And I think this is an extremely important distinction to make, because when you hear something, it goes in one ear and out the other. When you listen to something, you have a purpose, and there's a big distinction and line to draw between those two. And Sorensen shows you how to draw that line. First, you want to give your speaker attention. Give them all the due respect they deserve. You're trying to get a message from them, let them give it to you. Give them your full-fledged attention. Next, you want to avoid deflection. You want to keep the spotlight and center of attention on them. You don't want to change it to yourself or give it to somebody else or move it to a different topic. You want to keep it on them, and you want them to remain feeling like they're being heard. Next, you don't want to outsmart or make judgments. You don't want to try and pretend like you know more of the topic, because again, you're just going to build a wall between yourself and the speaker. If you're thinking like you know more, okay, you may know more, but let them say what they have to say before they go into a full defensive mode and just shut down and build up that wall. Don't make a judgment on them. Don't make that judgment, because once you make that judgment, you're only going to think about that and not the message being displayed. You want to look at the overall big picture and put things into context. Look at the theme. Look at the message they're presenting. Don't focus on the tiny details, because once you focus on the tiny details, it distracts from the overall big picture and theme, and things are just going to get diluted from there. You want to connect with them emotionally. You could do this verbally or non-verbally. You just want to establish a connection, making sure they feel like they are being heard. And next, you want to give that feedback. If you're able to give verbal and non-verbal feedback, then you're going to be good to go, and they're going to be giving you a good message overall. And after learning how to listen effectively, you must learn how to listen actively. And that goes into our next point, which is the 6 tips that Sorensen establishes for active listening. He said, quote, "Active listening is important in strengthening relationships and is a way through which one can offer their support to those who reach out to them." End quote. And that's exactly what you're trying to do through active listening. You're trying to build support, and that's what I think a lot of people struggle with. Sorensen alludes to the idea that first, you need to use open-ended questions. You need to avoid those yes or no simple questions, and you want to engage the speaker, get them to just talk more. You want to recap what the speaker said. Use your own words here. Just spit back to them just for some clarification, and make sure that you're getting everything right. This is making sure that they feel like they're being heard. Next, you want to reflect. Use the speaker's words. Because if they hear what they said and they feel like there's a discrepancy there, then boom, clarification and then communication is able to flourish and you're able to reach that full potential of that conversation. Next, you want to make things clear. Again, you use this in both the recap and reflection that I just talked about. You want to make things clear, make sure everything is constantly flowing between you and the speaker. You want to encourage them. This helps them think. You want to give them those nonverbals. You want to give them those verbals. You want to just make sure that they are presenting that message to the best of their ability. And next, you want to respond. You want to show emotion, and you want to give that feedback, which we already talked about earlier. Now that listening and active listening have both been covered, one has to ultimately improve their active listening through other listening skills and just combining them as a whole. Sorensen said, quote, "One way of improving your listening skills is to look at listening as an opportunity to gather information from various sources and even learning something new in some cases. So you have to go in there and you have to remember you're going in there with a purpose. First, you want to pay attention. Communication is a two-lane road. Without one lane, that road is not going to work, and you want to pay attention to the speaker. You want to use those cues we talked about. Establish connection. Establish that emotional just that emotional concept between the two people. You want to use and give them feedback. Again, that just makes them feel like they're being heard. They'll give you a more beneficial message, and you want to avoid interrupting them. You avoid interrupting them, they're going to feel like they're heard. So, with all of those concepts so far, I integrated the last 4 of them into my everyday life. Specifically, I integrated paying attention, using cues, feedback, and just avoiding interruptions. So I did debate for several years. I'm a debate coach for Howland High School. And just as a whole, I really do enjoy talking politics with people, and I enjoy talking religion with people. So through using those previously established messages, just paying attention, using cues, giving feedback, and avoiding interrupting, I was able to hear more of people's messages. I was able to hear more of what they believed, what they personally thought about, what they conceived of a topic, and I was able to understand a lot more. So realistically, the high degree of success of this book is real, and I would recommend it. But in conclusion, we have to think about what Brian said regarding that robot and puppet. You want to come down on that. You don't want that at all. You want to do what Sorensen said. You want to focus on the general tips of listening, the general tips of active listening, and integrating all of those together. And from my personal experience, I promise you this will work. So once again, if we're all able to actively listen, then I promise you relationships will be built up, communication will flourish, and overall this country will become a better place, and we won't have those puppets on strings, and we won't have those robots anymore. So thank you for listening.